Inside of the smouldering ruins of Berlin in early May 1945, a husband and wife made their way up a flight of stairs and into the wasteland that had once been the governmental headquarters of the Third Reich. Days before, inside of his underground network, known as the Fuhrerbunker, Adolf Hitler and his wife Eva Hitler, previously known as Eva Braun, had died, and their bodies were then torched inside of the garden outside. The husband and wife were walking, and they were gaunt with terror, and they knew there was no way out for them. They had turned their back on even their own children, having them murdered, with the woman in question being the one who helped her own sons and daughters die, as she did not want them to live in a world without National Socialism and Adolf Hitler. Magda Goebbels was a pale spectre inside the Reich Chancellery garden. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face was frozen, and her husband Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister and close friend, and at this moment, on the 1st of May 1945, also the Reich Chancellor, was gaunt and shaking. They made their way towards a bomb crater, where days earlier Joseph Goebbels had given Hitler one final salute, as the dictator's corpse began to become engulfed by the petrol-fueled inferno. Minutes later, the Goebbelses, two of the most recognisable figures inside the Third Reich, lay dead, their bodies riddled with bullets. But this is only one story of the shocking death of the Goebbelses. In this video, we look at their final moments inside the Reich Chancellery garden and try to uncover what specifically happened with their deaths. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Joseph Goebbels first began to indulge in Nazism in 1924. He was attracted to Hitler following the Beer Hall Putsch and the media attention that the cause attracted from this, Hitler being elevated from a mere local speaker to a worldwide celebrity. Goebbels joined the Nazi Party and was member number 8762, and this would probably surprise some, as he was not there from the very beginning. He offered himself to work for the local Nazi Party leaders, and he then later became a party speaker, and he worked in publishing for Nazi newspapers too. Goebbels read Mein Kampf and agreed with Hitler on his opinions, and he spoke alongside him at a number of rallies, and he then became close friends with Adolf Hitler. Goebbels kept throughout his life very detailed diaries, and when describing his early relationship with Hitler, he claimed, and I quote, "I love him. He has fought through everything. Such a sparkling mind can be my leader. I bow to the greater one, the political genius. Adolf Hitler, I love you, because you are both great and simple at the same time, which one calls a genius." Hitler to Goebbels was almost this messianic figure, someone like a god, who he was incredibly drawn to, and he continued to gain praise from the future dictator, and Goebbels was then offered the position of the Gauleiter of Berlin in August 1926, being a regional leader for the Nazis. He would hold this position throughout the Second World War, and he was one of the Gauleiters who regularly addressed his people throughout World War II. Goebbels was given command of the local SA and SS, and he only answered to Adolf Hitler. It was in 1930 that Joseph Goebbels met his future wife, Magda. She had been married before to a much older industrialist named Günther Quandt, and she did have a son from this marriage. It's believed that the first marriage showed Magda for being a gold digger, and Magda did have affairs during this. In the divorce settlement, she received a significant amount of wealth, but she first set her eyes on her second husband whilst attending a meeting of the Nazi Party, where she was impressed with Joseph Goebbels, who was speaking out. She then joined the Nazi Party on the 1st of September 1930, and she did volunteer for them, but she then moved to the party headquarters in Berlin to work, and she became a secretary to Goebbels' deputy, Hans Meinhauser. She was then spotted by Goebbels, and she would oversee his own private affairs, and Magda accompanied him on a trip to Weimar, and the pair then became romantically involved. They married on the 19th of December 1931, but their relationship had many issues before, and Joseph Goebbels was even jealous of Hitler, as he had become very fond of Magda, and he even saw the dictator as a threat to his relationship with his future wife. It was considered that Magda Goebbels would become the unofficial First Lady of the Third Reich, and she would maintain a very close friendship with Hitler throughout the rest of her life. And Hitler, a man who would later be responsible for the slaughter of millions of people, would become very fond of the Goebbels children. The couple had 6 children together, and Hitler would stay inside the Goebbels apartment in Munich to relax and play with the children, and there are many photographs showing this. Magda also became an unofficial figurehead for many women inside of the Reich, and many women wrote to her to ask her about different issues, and she answered many of these and did bring problems to the attention of the relevant ministers once the Nazis were in power. But her husband Joseph was a love rat and a sleazy man, and he would during the marriage have many affairs with different women. In 1936 he first met the Czech actress Lida Barova, and they began an intense affair, to the point where he considered leaving his wife. Hitler ordered Joseph to end this after he heard about it, and he hated the idea of his friends being caught up in a huge political scandal. Once Hitler was in power, Joseph Goebbels got to work inside the Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, and he was responsible for pushing the Nazi ideology and forcing it down the throat of everyone. Of course, the propaganda ministry also perpetuated many horrific campaigns that would lead to the suffering and persecution of so many. Goebbels' campaigns against the Jews were horrific and led to beatings in the streets and murder, and Goebbels even used film and new media to do this, some of his movies so brutal in their rhetoric that people would leave the picture houses and cinemas all across Germany and then batter civilians and innocent people who were just going about their day, and these people were intensely angry at what they'd saw, their brains being poisoned by the work of Joseph Goebbels. He continued to make terrible speeches for the Nazis, and he also helped to deport thousands of Jewish people from Berlin, and many were slaughtered and exterminated inside of camps within occupied Poland during World War II, slaughtered within minutes of arriving. He spoke with Hitler about this, and he was more than aware of what was happening. During the Second World War, Goebbels' work inside the propaganda ministry was of vital importance for the people of Germany, and he knew there would be a war panic, and he sought to propagate stories of German success on the battlefield. He controlled everything that was being broadcasted over the radios, or what was shown in the newspapers, and his short films were being shown all over the place, showing German victory. Even when the war had turned against the Germans, he was still broadcasting victorious footage, and the German people were not being shown a true story of what was happening. Magda Goebbels and Joseph had a huge amount of wealth through their links to Hitler and the Nazi hierarchy, but Magda behind closed doors actually began to question Hitler, and she claimed that he did not listen to any voices of reason, and said that Hitler only listened to those who he wanted to hear. She also regarded one of his speeches one evening as a lot of rubbish in front of others. But even her stepfather, who was Jewish, died inside of Buchenwald concentration camp, and she made no effort to help him. She was throughout her life suffering with ill health, including during World War II, and Magda was known to have had a delicate heart, and she had a severe depression and also neuralgia, and in August 1944 she was hospitalised for her conditions. In the final months of the war, the speeches Joseph Goebbels was making became very apocalyptic, and he would warn about the impending Soviets. He could not disguise defeat anymore. People were seeing it with their own eyes. Many would, after Hitler's final birthday, abandon the Reich, including those who were very loyal to Hitler, but the Goebbelses were different, and they remained firm inside of Berlin. Hitler announced on the 22nd of April 1945 that he would remain in Berlin and die by his own hand, and then Joseph Goebbels, Magda Goebbels and their children moved into the Fuhrerbunker, the upper parts of the Fuhrerbunker, where Hitler had been settled for some time. They could not imagine a life without Hitler. On the 23rd of April, Joseph Goebbels made a speech to the people of Berlin. He said, and I quote, "I call on you to fight for your city. Fight with everything you have got, for the sake of your wives and your children, your mothers and your parents. Your arms are defending everything we've ever held dear, and all the generations that will come after us. Be proud and courageous, be inventive and cunning. Your Gauleiter is amongst you. He and his colleagues will remain in your midst. His wife and children are here as well. He who once captured the city with 200 men will now use every means to galvanise the defence of the capital. The battle for Berlin must become the signal for the whole nation to rise up in battle. The reality of the war situation was incredibly dire. The Soviet Red Army were advancing towards Berlin very quickly, and they were on the outskirts of the city by the time that Goebbels made that speech. The supplies for those defending the city were dwindling to virtually nothing, and on the 29th of April, 1945, Eva Braun and Adolf Hitler married inside the Fuhrerbunker, and Joseph Goebbels acted as a witness. In the last will and testament to Adolf Hitler, which was dictated, Joseph Goebbels would become the Reich Chancellor, and Karl Dönitz, a Grand Admiral, the Reich President. Goebbels was not made the leader of the Nazi Party or the Führer, but his position was incredibly powerful at the top. He had been ordered by Hitler to leave Berlin and to save his life, but Goebbels stated, "For the first time in my life, I categorically refuse to obey Hitler's order, for reasons of humanity and personal loyalty." Hitler shot himself on the 30th of April 1945 inside of his study within the Fuhrerbunker, and Goebbels and his wife had decided to stay put and go the same way, bringing their lives to an end side by side with the Führer. Joseph became incredibly depressed with Hitler's death, and he began to aimlessly walk around the Reich Chancellery garden, just waiting for a Soviet shell to land so he could be killed. He stated to those inside the bunker that remained, "It is a great pity that such a man," meaning Hitler, "is no longer with us. But there is nothing to be done. For us, everything is lost now, and the only way out left for us is the one Hitler chose. I shall follow his example." Goebbels conducted one act as the Chancellor of Germany, dictating a letter to be sent to Soviet General Vasily Choykov, and this was delivered under a white flag, and the letter told the Soviet General of Hitler's death and requested an immediate ceasefire, but this was rejected. Goebbels then said goodbye to people inside the bunker, and it was claimed that he said, I quote, "The captain must not leave his sinking ship. I have thought about it all and decided to stay here. I have nowhere to go because with little children I would not be able to make it, especially with a leg like mine," referring to his bad foot. He would not attempt to break out like others would inside the bunker, but his mood would become murderous, as would his wife's. Goebbels, and particularly his wife Magda, had made arrangements for the murder of their 6 children. The 6 of them had accompanied their parents inside the bunker, and it was claimed by some inside that they were a light of sunshine in the dark and damp mood of the underground complex. The Goebbels children were injected with morphine to knock them out, and they then had a cyanide ampule crushed inside their mouths. They were killed in their beds, and Magda Goebbels had witnessed the murders, and she even rejected many different attempts to smuggle the children out of Berlin and to their own safety. She wanted her children to die inside the bunker. It was claimed by the last survivor of the Fuhrerbunker that, straight after Hitler's death, Mrs. Goebbels came down to the bunker with her children. She started preparing to kill them. She couldn't have done that above ground. There were other people who would have stopped her. That's why she came downstairs, because no one else was allowed in the bunker. She came down on purpose to kill them. Following the deaths of the children, Magda Goebbels was approached by her husband, and the pair did not say a word to each other. She sat at a table and played patience to the card game alone, knowing that her children were dead in a different room. But then the pair made preparations for their own deaths and demises. It is known for certain that Joseph and Magda Goebbels died on the 1st of May 1945, but there are differing accounts as to how this happened. It is known that Magda and Joseph walked out of the bunker's entrance at around 8:30 p.m. that night. They climbed up the stairs and walked into the garden of the Reich Chancellery, which at the time had been heavily shelled. Days before, the bodies of Hitler and his wife had been burned within a bomb crater in the garden. There were craters everywhere and a lot of debris. Joseph and Magda walked towards the site where Hitler's body had been burned, and the first account of their death is that they bit down on a cyanide capsule together close to this site. These capsules had been given to many by SS leader Heinrich Himmler, And the cyanide capsules, of course, had been used upon the Goebbels children within the bunker. These capsules were very potent, and within a matter of minutes the pair would have been dead if this was the method used. If this was the case, the remains would have been lying within the Reich Chancery garden after they consumed the poison and passed out. Death usually occurred within 3 minutes. But then following this, it was claimed that Goebbels' SS adjutant, Gunther Schwegemann, had been instructed to ensure that the pair were dead following the poison being consumed. Schwegemann later claimed that he walked out of the steps of the bunker and he saw the bodies of the pair, and then he ordered an SS soldier to fire several shots into the bodies of the Goebbelses to make sure that they were dead. Their bodies did not move and were lifeless. There is another account too. This is that Magda Goebbels consumed cyanide, and that her husband then turned a pistol upon his wife, shooting her in the head and finishing her off before turning the gun on himself. For Goebbels to have done this, he would have pulled out one of his pistols that he kept by his side most of the time. Specifically, he had 2 pistols, Walther pistols, by him, and he had these inside the bunker. The interesting thing about this idea is the fact that 2 charred and burned pistols were discovered inside the Reich Chancery garden, close by to the bodies, these pistols being the same ones that belonged to Joseph Goebbels. It's most likely that he brought 2 pistols out, if he did shoot his wife and then himself, just in case one of the pistols misfired and did not work. Goebbels was not experienced at handling firearms, like other Nazis such as Hermann Göring, who partook in hunting. Goebbels, with this theory, would have shot his wife first, who probably took cyanide as well, and then turned the gun on himself. It's probable that the SS officer then fired into the bodies with this to ensure that death had then occurred. There is also a third differing account, but this is doubted, and this comes from Rosh Mish, the last man of the Fuhrerbunker, who claimed that he had been told that Goebbels had killed himself in his room and offices inside the Fuhrerbunker, and that Magda killed herself inside the Fuhrerbunker, where she had been living with her children. Whichever way you think Goebbels and his wife died, it is certain what happened next. The bodies were placed inside of a bomb crater in the same manner of Hitler and Eva Braun, and they were then doused in petrol, but there was not sufficient fuel to cremate the corpses properly. The corpses were in a very bad way, and Magda burned better than Joseph, but she was still incredibly recognisable, and Joseph Goebbels was certainly recognisable, despite being charred. It was stated that, on the 2nd of May 1945, in Berlin, a few metres away from the air raid shelter in the grounds of the Reich Chancery, which had recently held Hitler's headquarters, the charred corpses of a man and a woman were found. It is noted that the man is of small stature. His right foot is in a semi-folded position in a charred orthopaedic shoe, and on his body were found the remains of his NSDAP party uniform and a party badge damaged by fire. By the head of the 2 corpses lay 2 Walther No. 1 pistols. The Soviets had captured the remains of Magda and Joseph Goebbels, and they showed the world Goebbels' body, photographing it and distributing these images for propaganda purposes. The pair were easily identifiable, and the charred corpses symbolised the insanity and terrible end of the Nazi regime. Taken also from the burned bodies was Joseph Goebbels' prosthesis and his wife's gold cigarette case, which had been given to her from Hitler. The remains were later taken to a Schmerz facility in Magdeburg, before they would later be exhumed in 1970 from the grave and be burned and crushed, being dealt with once and for all. The method of how Joseph Goebbels and Magda Goebbels died is not completely clear still today. Either he shot his wife after she consumed cyanide, or they both consumed poison, and he turned the gun on himself. It is certain that an SS officer shot a number of bullets into the pair to ensure that they had died. Joseph Goebbels rose to dizzying heights because of his close relationship to Hitler and his worth to the Führer, and he was the Minister of Propaganda and Enlightenment. But his wife was also incredibly close to Hitler, arguably more so, and her husband even became jealous of the Führer. They were one of the last few people of the Fuhrerbunker, and they chose to die on the same site that Hitler's body had been burned. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, And once again, thank you so much for watching.